Hi everybody, welcome to this video. We're going to be talking about the new relationship system in Darkest Dungeon 2. So this is a video I've wanted to make since the new system dropped. It came out a few days ago, and I have made a video already covering just kind of the patch notes, and if you're interested in just what the update is and what it contains, you can go ahead and click in the information box wherever it is. There's a little tag up here somewhere, and watch that video. But this one I'm going to be covering kind of my thoughts and opinions on it, and what's good in my opinion, and what's bad in my opinion. So to start off, I think really the first thing I want to say is that I'm going to try my best not to compare it to the old system. And the reason I'm doing that is because I think it's like comparing apples and oranges, in my opinion. They're very, very different, and I don't think comparing the new system to the old one really gets us anywhere. I think the old system was bad. I think that's just really how it boils down to. I think the old system was bad. I think this change needed to happen. I think the new system is definitely much better in almost every way. So I think it needs balancing. I think it needs some help, and we're going to talk about what those things are and what my opinions are on those. But I think for the most part, it is better. It's a better system. It has more room to grow than the old system did. It has more things that can be changed to make it better, and I don't think the old system had that. So I'm going to try my best not to compare the two that much, because I don't think it helps anything. I think it really forwards the conversation at all, and we're not getting it back, so there's no point in really talking about it. So we're going to be covering kind of the big aspects of this system and what I've seen. I've had a few runs now where I've gotten to take a look at it. I've seen a couple people playing it. I've talked to some people in the Discord and Reddit and just in general about it and their thoughts and feelings about it. So I'm going to try to collate all that stuff. You can check out the chapters below if you want to look at a certain part and talk about a certain part. And if you like this kind of video, do consider liking it. It definitely helps out the channel a lot. And so let's get into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is the new pips system. So if you haven't seen, this is what it looks like. The character sheet has changed now. So we've got this new system on the left here in the far left tab, the relationships tab. It no longer has kind of the single bar that is either positive or negative and kind of changes depending on how far along they are. It is basically just a straight linear scale, 0 to 20. And as you can see here, they've got these kind of gray pips that go up or down depending on where you are, and wherever you are will indicate the level of friendliness that you have. And being at super high or super low doesn't actually mean that they get a relationship automatically like it used to. What it means is that depending on where you are on that scale, when you leave the inn, it has a chance to roll either a negative or a positive relationship, or no relationship whatsoever. The higher you are to the right, the higher chance you have a positive relationship. The further you are on the left, the higher chance that you have a negative relationship. So it's, in my opinion, I think this is one of the few things that I would really like to see changed. I think the UI is just kind of bleh. I think these gray pips are very boring. I think the bars at the top that indicate the level that they're at are kind of hard to read and understand. Something else that I would really like to see with this is just when you hover over, there's a tooltip when you hover over the unfriendly or neutral, and it just says high or low level of likelihood that a relationship will form. I would really just like to see the percentages put there, that if you're at 17 pips or whatever, just tell me that I'm at an 80% chance for a positive, 10% chance for a negative, and a 10%, whatever it is, because I want to know. I just want to know when I'm leaving the inn what my chances are. I don't think there's anything bad about doing that, and these ambiguous tooltips really don't help. So that's something that I think definitely needs to change. I will say that the new pip system feels a lot more fluid because of the fact that you re-roll relationships at every inn. So you leave the inn, depending on where you are on the scale, you'll roll relationships, and then you keep those relationships through the duration of that region. Even if you have a positive relationship and somehow melt down to 0 pips, you'll keep that positive relationship until the next inn, and then when you embark again, you'll go ahead and reform it. I really like this change. I think it makes things feel a lot more fluid, whereas before, I definitely felt kind of locked in. I felt very like, if you had gotten all positive relationships early on, or even all negative relationships, it was very hard to get out of that. It feels a bit easier to kind of, or at least to me, it feels more up and down. You can definitely sway from left to right a lot easier, which I think is a good thing. I think there should be a balance. You shouldn't just always be getting good relationships. You shouldn't always be getting bad relationships. It should be something that ebbs and flows and is something you have to. I find myself being more cognizant of my decisions and being more aware of like, okay, where is that putting me on the pip scale, because it's now more chance based. It's not guaranteed like it used to be, because the old system, it was, I know I've got 1 pip left. If I get that pip, I get a relationship. On this one, it's, you know, I just need to get as high as I can and hope that I get the relationship. And that uncertainty, I think, is a good thing. I think that's part of Darkest Dungeon, is the uncertainty of like, hey, I'm at 18 pips, but there's still a chance I won't get a relationship. Now, I have seen some people complaining that they're at like 20 pips and they managed to get a negative relationship. From what I've seen, that shouldn't be possible. And I think once you're at like 18 pips, you shouldn't have 0 chance of getting a negative relationship. Maybe even lower than that, in my opinion. It definitely feels kind of bad when you're like 17 pips and you've worked really hard to get that high, and then you get a negative relationship. I know that there needs to be kind of a balance where there is a chance either way, depending on where you are, but maybe that needs to be kind of brought more into the neutral zone. The other thing I've seen a lot of people complain about, and I kind of agree, I'm not sure what the fix is for this, is getting relationships after the first inn, after the valley, right? So you do the valley, you go to the inn, and you leave, and you start at 9 pips, and you maybe fluctuate depending on what you use at the inn. I've seen a lot of people get negative relationships right off the bat, and that kind of feels a little odd to me. I think it like doesn't make much sense to form a relationship that early in the run. I would even say it might be better to have no chance of forming relationships after the first inn. That first region is kind of like, thematically, it's where people are trying to figure each other out on your team, and that gives you some time to kind of collect some items, make some decisions, and then, you know, change the direction of where your relationships are going, either good or bad, but at least you have the control of it. I don't know if that's a change that needs to happen. It's just something I've seen a couple people complain about. I haven't had it happen to me yet, but I do know that if I left the first valley, like left the inn, and I got 3 negative relationships in the first region, it would feel pretty bad, especially if I hadn't really used any inn items. I've seen some people who are just at like the base 9 and they got like 2-3 negative relationships. It's like, what could I have done about that? I didn't get any items to make them positive, and I'm just at neutral, and now I'm getting negative relationships. It does kind of feel a bit bad, but I'm not quite sure what the fix is there. Just my opinion there is that maybe could change. So yeah, I definitely think that the system here is pretty good, but would like to see it cleaned up a bit. I would like to see this UI made a bit more vivid or just visually interesting. The old system was definitely more visually interesting, made a bit more sense. When you just looked at it, you kind of knew where you were. This one's a lot more ambiguous. I think adding I don't even know if we need the pips per se. Like, you can just give me the number and then just give me a percentage next to it. It says if they're at 8 out of 20, that they have a 70% chance to get a negative relationship or something like that. So that way I can just know where they're at, like, immediately while looking at it. The other thing I would like to see is the same thing, like statistics for Meltdowns and Resolve or Resolute, but we'll get to that in a second. So yeah, this is a picture here of the system. And then if I can scroll out here and go to the next one, here's a more positive one. So you can see they just say friendly. You don't actually get the relationship name until you roll the relationship outside of the inn. So it's just something to keep in mind. It does get, again, a little bit confusing. If they're hopeful, and then in the next region you manage to get all their pips down to 0, it'll still say hopeful, and then they'll be really unfriendly. And it just kind of, at a glance, it takes a second longer than I think it should do to really understand where you're at with relationships. So just something I think can change. So moving on, the next thing I want to talk about is one of the best things that's been added to the game, which is the Embark Screen. So this is where you see your outcome of relationships. And the coolest thing here, and I think the thing that most people are really leveraging on and should be, is this amazing artwork. So there's artwork now for every region. I've got the Sprawl here, and I've also got the Tangle. There's one for the Fodder, there's one for the Sluice, there's one for the Mountain, one for the Shroud. Really, really cool. You get your characters here, they stand there, they look cool, it's animated. Very, very nice addition to the game. Just adds a little bit of world building. So this is, I know it's a very minimal, it doesn't really add anything to the gameplay, but it does to the immersion, and that's very important. So really good job there, environmental team, artwork team, absolutely killing it. And so you can see over here, this is also where you'll see your relationships. So you'll come to this screen and it'll have a bunch of question marks here, and you click on each of them and it tells you what relationship you get and what abilities that affects. So if you don't know about the ability effects, we're going to talk about that in a bit as well, and go a bit more in depth into that. But this is where you'll find that information. So you can see here somebody rolled pretty much all positive relationships. Pretty interesting here. This one's a bit glitched out. There's still some visual bugs and stuff, but here in the sprawl you can see a couple relationships. So this is where you'll see that outcome. Definitely think the Embark Screen is one of the coolest things that has been added to the game. So, all right, so next thing we're going to talk about, and one of my favorite things, I think one of the best additions, and one of the things that I think has been asked for the most, is the new Meltdown system, or the new resolve check, right? So very similar to Darkest Dungeon 1, or at least in the old system. Again, I said I wasn't going to compare, but in the old system, when you hit 10 stress, you had a meltdown. That was it. There was no other option. It was meltdown, and that was it. So what a lot of people didn't like, and what I didn't like, was just how sure that was, right? When you hit 10 stress, it was just like you get to 9 stress, and you just like, okay, it's gonna happen. There's nothing you can do about it, and especially when it happened on the road, it felt particularly unfair. And it was like, okay, I know what's coming. So the way that's changed now is that meltdowns are not guaranteed. You actually have a chance to get to become resolute. I don't like the wording of that. To have your resolve tested and to become resolute. It sounds a little weird, but they didn't want to call it virtues. I understand that. I want it to be a little bit different. The difference between this and Darkest Dungeon 1 is that meltdowns and resolute are not permanent status effects. They are just something that happen immediately. They apply effects and then you move on, right? So they reduce your stress down. They either heal or hurt you. They can give you good or bad quirks. They change your affinity status of all of your other heroes, so they either increase them or they lower them depending on if you melt down or not. Obviously, the chances to melt down are much higher. There are quirks and other items that affect your ability to get resolute versus meltdown, which is pretty cool. So, you know, even though they're very minute chances, you can still increase them, which is a good thing. And I think the biggest thing that this adds to the game, and one of the most important aspects that this update has given, is that nail bite factor. I talked about this in my other video. I've heard a lot of other people talk about this, but the fact that there is just a slight chance, a sliver of hope, that when you get to that 10 stress, that you might get resolute instead of meltdown is huge, right? No matter what you tell yourself, no matter, oh, it's gonna be a meltdown, you always have that bit in the back of your mind, that little bit of hope that you're gonna get the good outcome and not the bad one. And the good ones feel very good. They really boost you up. And they make you feel powerful. They give you like that swinging attitude, like, yes, I'm just gonna go for it. Like get out of the gate swinging and do all that stuff. Very, very cool. I definitely think this is one of the best things they could have added to the game, because it just adds that tension back. That's very Darkest Dungeon. And it just gives you a little bit of hope. And I think that thematically that fits the game. It's all about like clinging onto the hope that you can hold on to. And this is a great part of that. So this is by far, in my opinion, I don't think there's anything negative about this to say, just that it's something that's really good. I think they need to balance maybe some of the percentages of it happening. It seems like I've been told it's like a 20% chance that you can get resolute instead of meltdown. I've not seen it yet personally, but I've seen a couple other people get them. So who knows? We'll have to see. But definitely a very, very cool thing. Here's the resolute screen. So very cool. We've got animations as well, and new animations for both meltdown and resolute. Meltdown looked kind of blah and gray and boring before. Now it's got the cool blue background. You've got the stress symbol that we're also familiar with, the Iron Crown. And then, of course, for resolute, we've got a very similar to the virtue screens that you used to get in Darkest Dungeon 1. It feels powerful. It's very colorful. It's very bold. Really, really cool. Love these new animations that they've added. And here's they've started making these, so if anybody's interested, you can see these in the Darkest Dungeon Discord. They've got these cool little cards that they're making for all the different heroes, so you can see their meltdown and resolute together. Pretty cool. Really like this. Good job, Red Hook. The next thing we're going to talk about is the act outs. So this is one of the coolest things, again, I think they've done, which is that they removed the random act outs that were negative, and they've made them rarer, and they feel very powerful. Now, there are 3 act outs that are currently in the game. They're only for positive relationships, so there are no longer negative act outs that take away from gameplay. The 3 of them are amorous, respectful, and hopeful. Inseparable has been removed from the game, and I believe tumultuous was the negative one that was removed from the game, but I'm not sure. I think they removed 1 of each. So these act outs feel better than they did. They're less jarring. They're very quick. I shouldn't say they're less jarring. I will say they're very bold. So as you can see here, they've got this like new backdrop for each of them. It can be a little bit crazy to see because it like you're just watching the game and then all of a sudden there's this like bright colorful background. This doesn't give justice. I think the the hopeful one really shows how bright it is. I mean, it is bright. It really hits you in the face with this moment between your two heroes, and each of them have different things that they do. Amorous heals. Hopeful adds a ridiculous buff, which I'll show you in a second, and then Respectful causes the other hero to do damage with you, the double attack essentially, which can all, lead to death blows and stuff. I think this is really good direction, generally speaking. I think they need to work on the visuals a little bit. I like the idea of these cool backdrops. It makes these moments feel very impactful, very like, oh crap, this is a really big moment. They may need to tune it down a bit. They said they were pretty rare. I've had them happen quite a lot, if I'm honest, like a couple times a fight if it lasts more than a couple rounds. And I would really like these things to be like very big moments that are like, yes, this is really cool. And like really helps out, and not, but they do go very quick, so they don't feel as bad. I almost want them to last a little longer so I can really see these screens, because they last for like 3 seconds or something, and I would like them to last like 5 or 6 seconds just so I can see the backdrop, really kind of like, yes, this moment happened. I will say that the hopeful buff, this is the buff that you get for hopeful, by the way, is kind of insane and is probably going to need to be nerfed. This is just a little ridiculous. I mean, it's cool, but like 3 turns of this is a lot. So just, I don't know. I think it's going to need some balancing. I think it's cool that they've added something like this, or at least tweaked it to be this. It does feel a bit better, but I'm glad that it's less common. I'm glad that the act outs no longer block moves. That's something that we're going to talk about as well, is that they now telegraph, right? So instead of blocking things, you get a little symbol that basically shows you if you're going to have a positive or a negative affinity like change with somebody else if you use a move. I think that's a good thing. I know some people are saying that it can be kind of gamed, like you can kind of like, oh, I know it's going to happen, so now I can do that to make sure my relationships go up or down. And to that, I would say, yeah, that's kind of the point, right? They're allowing you the strategic choice of making maybe a suboptimal play because you can sacrifice a little bit of damage, but you get like 1 or 2 pips relationship. That could be really good, because that's going to be super powerful for you later down the road if you can get a positive relationship and get blessed abilities, or get these act outs or whatever the case is. So I think it's a good thing. The telegraphing looks good. I think it needs to be maybe a bit more visually noticeable. I did find myself kind of not even noticing that there was a telegraph on the screen a couple times, but I think that's just me. I think that's just me just skipping, not even like, I've been playing the game so much that I just haven't even seen it. So definitely something I think needs to be kept in mind, but I think overall the telegraphing system is really good. I think it just allows you more options to be strategic. I know some people, like I said, think that it can be kind of cheesed. I don't think it can be cheesed that bad. I think you get a couple pips one way or the other. It's really not that big a deal. So, all right, so then moving on to one of the last things I want to talk about here, which is the cursed and blessed abilities. So I'm going to talk about curses first. So this is what it looks like. Essentially, you kind of saw that on the Embark screen where they had the positive ones. This is what the negative ones look like. They've got these little blue indicators around them. And essentially how you get this is if you get a negative relationship, both characters in that relationship, both heroes, get an ability that is picked at random, though it does favor mastered abilities. That is an update they have made. So it does favor mastered abilities, which I think is a good change. And it picks those abilities. It forces them onto your action bar. So you have to have them on your action bar. So you lose a slot if you're not already using that ability. And then it has a modifier. And that modifier means that when you use that ability, it will do something to the hero that you have the negative relationship with. So in the case of, I think, Suspicious, it has the chance to give them, or it will attempt to give them, a taunt and a vulnerable token. I think other ones are blind, a stress hit, and I think that's it. I think those are the 3 of them. And the same for the blessed abilities, except the opposite. They're good things. And I know some people have said it's kind of annoying because it forces the ability onto you. This is supposed to be a negative thing. I will say that the addition that they now prefer, though not guaranteed, but prefer mastered abilities is good. What that does is means that it's more likely that it's going to pick an ability that you're already using, so you're less likely to have your action bar kind of stolen away from you, especially if you get multiple relationships. I think if you get like 3 negative relationships, you end up with 3 abilities forced on your action bar. If at least 2 of them are mastered, at least that means that those were abilities that you were using, so you're less likely to get completely screwed out of your actions that you were going to use or the play style that you were going for. But it is a bit jarring, and I think that's supposed to be the point. I think it's an interesting idea. I do think I can see a lot of people getting really salty about it. I've definitely had moments where it's picked an ability and forced it on my bar, and I'm like, oh god, I really don't want this. Like, I don't want to use this. And to that, I would say, if you're, that just means you got to work towards positive relationships. I don't think it really needs much of a change. I think this is a really interesting mechanic. I do think it probably needs a bit of balancing, and I need to play with it a bit more before I can really say if it's that bad or that good. But I think it's overall a good idea. I will say that the benefits here is that the negative ones, they debuff you, and your debuff can be resisted, so it's not guaranteed. So they're not that bad. You can, if you have a decent debuff resist, or you get some items that help you with your debuff resist, you can kind of ignore this. You can be like, yeah, it's fine. I can still use it because if it blinds me, I have like a 60% chance for it to not blind me if I have good debuff resist, or maybe you get lucky and it blinds your leper, and it's like, well, that doesn't matter. So, like, who cares, right? So, again, it is RNG heavy, but I think it's a pretty fun mechanic. I quite like it. The same goes for the blessed abilities. This is what blessed abilities look like on the hotbars. So you can see down here, they've got this nice golden aura around them. Again, they have modifiers, so I'll show you what the modifier looks like. You'll see here, this is for Defender. Whenever this man-at-arms uses Defender, he doesn't have to use it on Audrey. Anytime he uses it, Audrey will get a -1 stress heal. So, again, you don't have to use it on that hero that the other person, you have that relationship, good or bad, with. It can be used as a regular ability. It will just do this as well. I will say the Amorous one, which heals for now 10% of health, I think feels very powerful. Maybe a bit too powerful. It can kind of be, if you get really lucky and get like all Amorous, you can basically just be healing your whole team the whole time, all the way. That is counteracted by the fact that your relationships do re-roll after every region, but who knows, maybe you get to the mountain, all of a sudden your heroes are healing no matter what they do on everybody else. I think that can definitely be abused. So maybe that needs to be tweaked a little bit. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it should be that way. It should feel powerful. It does make you feel very powerful. I will say that I do like the fact that you don't get forced to use these abilities if they're blessed. If they're blessed, you can just keep them, and you don't want to use it because it's an ability you don't want to use and it's not optimal for your play style and the team that you're building. You don't have to use it. So, it's kind of up to you to make that. It gives you more things to make choices about and go, well, I could use that ability because I'll get the stress heal. That's pretty good. Yeah, sure, I can take this one ability off my action bar and use this one. I think that's a really good idea. It definitely helps kind of like solidify different play styles, which I think is really, really important. So, for sure. And yeah, I think that's pretty much everything I've got, right? I don't think I have any more images on this, but I think overall my thoughts on this system are that it is better than the old one, that it has more room for growth. I think it needs work. It needs balance. Some of the things feel a bit too powerful. Sometimes it can feel like it's working against you a little too much. But the thing that I really enjoy about it is that it gives the control and the awareness back to the player. You can make the choices knowing the outcome. And I think that's really important, because even if the RNG is against you, at least you understand what the outcome might be, right? At least you understand the percentages. At least you can see when the pips are going to go up and down. At least you can make the suboptimal play and know that it's going to give you a stress, pip up because you've got a cursed ability, but it's the better choice for this combat. And you're not getting these random act outs that just take away from your control, that really throw you out of the moment. I know the biggest complaints that I've seen, or some of the other bigger complaints I've seen, have been to do with the fact that stress doesn't feel as important now, right? You no longer have that like 4 pip stress threshold where people start barking, negative at things at each other and having more act outs, because that's no longer a thing. The random act outs are no longer a thing. In fact, you can start getting negative barks at 0 stress. They just kind of happen wherever now. It's just a chance thing. It doesn't have anything to do with your stress value. I do agree that needs a little bit of work, I think. I liked the idea that there was kind of a scale on stress, that the more stressed you got, the more detrimental it was to the way your heroes acted. Because it makes sense. Because in the old game, it was very much stress was just a number until you hit 100, and then you had a heart attack. Or not a heart attack, but then you had you had your resolve tested, at 100. So it was 0 to 100, quite literally. Only when 100 hit did you have something happen. And this goes back to that idea where you don't really have anything bad happen, anything that is drastically different, at least until you hit 10 stress. So then you have the Meltdown or the Resolute. Some people may like that, some people may dislike that. I don't know if that's the right option. I don't know if that's the better way to do it. I think for now it's just the way that it is, and I have to play with it a bit more before I feel. But I did personally enjoy that kind of scale of like, the more stress you have, the more stressed the character feels, right? Which I think thematically makes sense. I just don't know how they would implement that into this system the way that it is now. But yeah, I think overall it's a good system. I do think it's better. I do think it has more options for change. I think it's gonna need some changes, but I think the end result of this system is going to be way better than the end result of the original system. So that's at least my thoughts on it. If you have differing opinions, or I missed something, or I didn't talk about something, please go ahead and leave a comment. Let me know what you think about it. Seriously, I know that Red Hook watches these videos and they check all the feedback in different places. So if you have feedback, let them hear it, so that way they can make these changes. Kudos to Red Hook if you're watching, because this was a big, bold change to make. That whole system, y'all could have just kind of tweaked it a little bit, or just left it and just said that's what we've got to deal with. But they took the time to change the entire system for this. So kudos to you, Red Hook. Really good job. And yeah, thank you for watching the video. That's really all I got to say. If you enjoyed this content, do consider subscribing to the channel. It definitely helps me out. We're on a road to 1,000 subs to get that YouTube partner. So definitely help out. And I'll catch you in the next one.